The kitchen was quiet except for the steady ticking of the old clock on the wall. Its hands crept forward, marking time in a way that felt almost mocking. The divorce papers lay spread out across the table, their cold, official tone filling the room more heavily than any spoken word could. I stared at them, my fingers tracing the edges of the documents as if that touch could somehow make them less real. The ink was still fresh, and the weight of the decision pressed on me like a physical thing. A half-empty cup of coffee sat beside the papers, the bitter liquid now lukewarm, untouched since morning. The steam had long since faded, leaving only the faint scent of burnt beans lingering in the air. Behind the window, the late afternoon sun cast a dull light, muted by the wilted flowers resting on the windowsill. Their petals drooped, curling inward as if echoing the slow collapse of everything I once believed would last. I am Emma Harper, and today marks the beginning of the unraveling of my life as I knew it. 15 years of marriage dissolved into these sheets of paper, signed and sealed, a formal goodbye to the man I once thought I would grow old with. Mark. His name felt strange now, distant and heavy with all the memories that had turned sour. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses in on you after the storm has passed. I sat alone at the kitchen table, my mind replaying the last few months, the cold shoulders, the sharp words, the growing chasm between us that neither of us dared to bridge. The divorce wasn't sudden. It was the inevitable conclusion to years of silent drifting apart, of promises broken and resentments buried beneath polite smiles. I reached out and picked up the wilted bouquet. The flowers had been bright once, vibrant and full of life, just like the early days of our marriage. Now, they were a reminder of neglect, of care fading away until there was nothing left but dried petals and brittle stems. I closed my eyes and breathed in their faint scent, a mixture of faded sweetness and something like regret. Memories flooded in, our wedding day, the laughter, the late-night talks that once felt like the foundation of everything. How did it all slip away? When did the warmth turn cold? Mark had become a stranger in his own home, and I had become someone I barely recognized. The divorce papers were the final acknowledgement of that truth. I glanced around the kitchen, noticing the small details that now seemed alien. The chipped mug Mark had used every morning, the stack of magazines he never read, the chair he always left pulled out just a bit too far from the table. The house was filled with traces of him, but it no longer felt like home. It was a museum of memories I wasn't ready to face. The clock ticked on, relentless and unforgiving. I wondered how long it would take before the silence was broken, by a phone call, a knock at the door, or the arrival of someone who could make this feel less like an ending and more like a beginning. But for now, there was only me, the fading light, and the weight of a life that had quietly fallen apart. I reached for the coffee again, but the bitterness was too much. I set the cup down and folded my hands on the table, willing myself to find some strength in the quiet. The future stretched out uncertain and vast before me, a path I had to walk alone. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew I couldn't stay here, trapped in the shadow of what once was. Outside, the wind stirred the branches of the trees, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. I took a deep breath and stood up, leaving the divorce papers and the wilted flowers behind. The house was silent, but inside me, something was beginning to stir, a fragile flicker of hope, a tentative step toward reclaiming a life I had lost. The house felt emptier than it had the day before. Boxes cluttered the living room, half-packed and waiting for me to decide what was worth keeping and what belonged in the trash. Mark's belongings were spread out like relics from a life that no longer included me. I had spent the morning sorting through his things, each item a reminder of the man I thought I knew, and the distance that had grown between us. In the study, I was moving a stack of old books when my fingers brushed against something unusual, a loose panel in the wall. It wasn't obvious at first, just a faint gap where the wood didn't quite align. The edges were worn, and a thin draft seeped through, cold and unexpected. My heart quickened. This house, so familiar and yet so full of secrets, suddenly seemed like a puzzle I hadn't even begun to solve. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the panel as dust motes danced in the slant of sunlight pouring through the window. The air smelled of old paper and forgotten years. I traced the edges carefully, the wood rough beneath my fingertips. It was slightly ajar, as if inviting me in, or daring me to uncover what had been hidden all this time. Slowly, I pushed the panel, and it gave way with a faint creak. A narrow opening revealed itself, dark and narrow, like a secret passage that belonged in a storybook rather than this quiet suburban home. I peered inside, the faint outline of a doorframe barely visible beyond the shadows. My breath caught in my throat. What was this place? Why had Mark kept it hidden? The study was a room I had entered countless times, but this hidden door was a secret I had never known existed. A shiver ran down my spine, part fear, part curiosity. I closed the panel carefully behind me, then reached for the door handle, cold and smooth beneath my palm. It resisted at first, but with a gentle push, it swung open, revealing a narrow corridor beyond. The air was cooler here, tinged with the scent of aged wood and dust. My footsteps echoed softly as I stepped inside, the light from the study fading behind me. The passage was cramped, walls lined with faded wallpaper peeling at the edges, and the floorboards creaked underfoot. I could feel the weight of years pressing in, as if this secret room had been waiting patiently for me to find it. At the end of the corridor, a faint glow spilled from under another door. I moved toward it slowly, my pulse quickening with every step. The handle was cold, but it turned easily, and the door swung open to reveal a small, dimly lit room. The scent of old paper was stronger here, mingled with something faintly metallic, like the lingering trace of forgotten memories. Inside, a small desk stood against one wall, cluttered with notebooks, loose papers, and photographs pinned to a corkboard. The room felt like a shrine to a hidden life, a private world Mark had kept carefully locked away. I scanned the desk, my eyes catching on the scattered notes and faded photographs. The light flickered from a single bulb overhead, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. My gaze fell on a diary resting on the edge of the desk. Its leather cover was worn, and on it, in neat handwriting, was my name, Emma. My breath hitched. Why would Mark have a diary with my name on it in a secret room? I reached out, fingers trembling, and opened the cover. The pages were filled with entries, thoughts, observations, and secrets I had never been privy to. As I read the first few lines, the world I thought I understood began to unravel. The diary spoke of a life Mark had kept hidden from me, a double existence that I had never suspected. There were mentions of secret meetings, coded messages, and people whose names I didn't recognize. The words hinted at a complexity beneath the surface of our marriage, a web of lies and half-truths spun carefully to keep me in the dark. Photographs pinned nearby showed Mark with strangers, faces unfamiliar and expressions guarded. In some, he smiled warmly, in others, the atmosphere was tense, almost dangerous. I flipped through the pages, each entry pulling me deeper into a world I had no idea existed. There was a side of Mark I had never seen, a life lived in shadows while I had been left in the light. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in with the weight of the revelations. My mind raced, trying to piece together how much of our life had been a lie, and how much was still waiting to be uncovered. The quiet ticking of the clock in the study echoed in my ears, a reminder that time was slipping away, and with it, any chance I had to reclaim the truth. A sudden noise startled me, a soft knock at the door behind me. My heart leapt, and I spun around, only to find the hallway empty and still. The silence returned, heavier than before, and I realized I was no longer alone in this house. The secrets were waking up, and I was standing at the edge of something much larger than I had imagined. I closed the diary carefully, tucking it under my arm, and stepped back into the corridor. The loose panel creaked softly as I replaced it, sealing the secret room away once more. But the questions lingered, thick and unrelenting. What else had Mark hidden? Who were the people in those photographs? And most urgently, what did it mean for the life I thought I had lost? As I moved back to the study, the fading light caught the edges of the diary, the name Emma staring up at me like a challenge. I sat down slowly, the weight of the discovery pressing down, and realized that the divorce papers on the kitchen table were only the beginning. The real story was just starting to unfold, and I was right in the middle of it. The diary rested heavily in my lap, its worn leather cover cool against my skin as I sat back in the quiet study. The afternoon light had faded to a dull gray, filtering weakly through the blinds and casting long shadows across the room. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, but inside, a different kind of silence hung, one heavy with secrets and unanswered questions. I traced my fingers over the edges of the pages, reluctant to begin, yet unable to resist the pull of the words within. The first entry was dated more than 5 years ago, written in a neat, precise hand that I recognized immediately as Mark's. The ink was faded in places, the paper yellowed at the corners, but the words were sharp, alive with a sense of urgency that unsettled me. Opening the diary carefully, I slid my thumb over the first line. Emma, if you ever find this, know that there is more to our story than I could ever say aloud. My breath hitched. The entry continued, unfolding a narrative I had never been prepared to hear. Mark wrote about a life hidden beneath the surface, meetings in shadowed places, people whose names were whispered with caution, and a world where trust was a currency far more valuable than money. The room seemed to close in around me as I read, the musty scent of old paper mingling with the faint odor of dust and something else, something like secrets long buried. On the desk beside me, photographs were pinned to a corkboard, each one telling a fragment of the story I had been blind to. Faces I didn't recognize stared back, some smiling warmly, others with expressions guarded, even wary. One photograph caught my eye in particular, Mark standing beside a man I didn't know, both dressed sharply in suits, their smiles too practiced to be genuine. Behind them was a nondescript building, its gray facade blending with the overcast sky. The caption on the back was simply a date and the word meeting. I flipped through the diary, each page revealing more layers of this hidden life, a double existence that had been carefully concealed from me. There were coded messages embedded in the entries, references to locations and times that seemed meaningless at first glance but hinted at something far more complex. Mark wrote of secret alliances, of dangers that lurked just beyond the edges of the life I had shared with him. The weight of the discovery pressed down, making it hard to breathe. Was this the reason our marriage had fallen apart? Had I been living alongside a man whose world was built on deception and danger? My eyes stung as I turned another page, the handwriting growing more urgent, more desperate. He spoke of a meeting that could change everything, a decision that might protect me, or destroy us both. I looked up from the diary, my gaze drifting around the dim room. The single bulb overhead flickered, casting wavering light across the cluttered desk. The scattered notebooks, the pinned photographs, the loose papers, they were all pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known existed. I felt both lost and strangely alive, caught between fear and the need to uncover the truth. A sudden creak from the hallway jolted me back to reality. The house was still silent, but that noise reminded me how alone I was in this. I closed the diary slowly, the name Emma etched on the cover now feeling less like a label and more like a summons. This wasn't just Mark's secret anymore, it was mine too. My fingers brushed over the corkboard, lingering on a particular photograph that hadn't caught my attention before. It was a candid shot of Mark with a woman whose face was partially obscured by shadow. They stood close, their eyes locked in something intense and unspoken. I felt a pang of something I couldn't name. Was it jealousy, betrayal, or simply the shock of not knowing the man I had spent years with? The diary was a map to a world I hadn't been invited into, and every entry deepened the mystery. There were mentions of coded messages and mysterious meetings, hinting at a network of people and places I had never imagined existed. It was as if Mark had lived two lives side by side, one public and mundane, the other secret and dangerous. I reached for a notebook lying open on the desk. Its pages were filled with scribbled notes, cryptic symbols, and hastily jotted phone numbers. My heart pounded as I realized that this was not just a diary but a key to understanding everything. There was a language here, a code I needed to break if I wanted to uncover the full truth. The room was filled with shadows now, the last light slipping away as evening settled outside. I felt a mixture of dread and determination. I could turn away, close the door on this hidden life and pretend I never found the secret room. But something inside me refused to let go. The questions were too urgent, the need for answers too strong. I sat back, the diary open on my lap, and let the silence settle once more. The hidden life Mark had lived was no longer just his, it was mine to uncover, piece by piece. The photographs, the notebooks, the coded messages, they were all clues waiting to be discovered. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the window panes and carrying with it the promise of storms to come. I knew that whatever lay ahead would change everything. But for now, in this dimly lit room filled with secrets, I allowed myself to feel the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find the truth buried beneath the lies. The diary had become my constant companion, its pages worn from endless flipping as I tried to piece together the fragments of Mark's secret life. Each entry revealed more layers, hidden meetings, cryptic messages, and a world that had been carefully obscured from me. I found myself drawn deeper into a maze of shadows that stretched far beyond the confines of our quiet home. It started with the coded messages. At first, they seemed like random scribbles, letters and numbers jumbled together in a way that didn't make sense. But as I traced the patterns, a method emerged. Mark had developed a system, a way to communicate without words, using symbols and shorthand only he could decipher. The more I studied, the clearer the picture became. He was involved in something clandestine, a network of contacts and dealings hidden beneath the surface of our everyday lives. Photographs pinned to the corkboard told a story that words alone could not. There were images of Mark with people I had never met, some in business suits, others in more casual clothes, their faces a mix of tension and familiarity. One photo showed Mark shaking hands with a man whose smile didn't reach his eyes, while another captured a quiet moment between Mark and a woman whose gaze was intense and knowing. These were not casual acquaintances, they were part of a world I had been kept from, a life lived in parallel to the one I thought we shared. I read an entry dated 2 years ago, where Mark wrote about a second identity he had assumed, a persona that allowed him to move undetected in circles I could only guess at. There were references to meetings held in unmarked buildings, exchanges of information that had to be kept secret, and a growing fear that his two lives might collide with devastating consequences. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how little I truly knew about the man I had married. The Mark I thought I understood, the kind, steady husband who made me coffee every morning and smiled at our quiet dinners, was only one face of a deeper, more complex man. Somewhere beneath that surface was a network of secrets, dangerous alliances, and risks I had never imagined. One night, as I pored over the diary and photographs, a pattern began to emerge in the coded messages. They referenced locations, addresses, times, and dates that connected to the photographs on the corkboard. It was as if Mark had left a trail, breadcrumbs leading me through his hidden life. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. What if following these clues brought me closer to the truth? Or worse, into danger? Among the photographs, one stood out starkly. It was a picture of Mark with a younger woman, her face soft but serious, her eyes locked on his in a moment that felt both intimate and urgent. There was a note scribbled on the back, Isabel, 2017. The name was unfamiliar, but the connection was undeniable. As I stared at the photo, a cold knot formed in my stomach. Who was she? And what role did she play in this hidden story? I found a journal entry that mentioned Isabel by name, describing secret meetings and whispered conversations that hinted at something more than just business. There was a tension in the writing, a sense of risk that seemed to pulse beneath the surface. Mark wrote about promises made and broken, trust earned and lost, and a fear that the truth might shatter everything. The more I read, the more the lines between truth and deception blurred. Mark had been living a double life, one filled with shadows and half-truths. I was left wondering which parts of our life together had been real, and which had been carefully constructed illusions. One evening, as the sky darkened outside and the house settled into silence, I sat alone in the study, the diary open on my lap. The pages felt heavy with the weight of secrets, but I couldn't stop. I needed to understand. I needed to know who Mark really was, and what he had been hiding from me all these years. The photographs, the coded messages, the diary entries, they were pieces of a puzzle I was desperate to solve. And yet, with every answer I uncovered, new questions emerged. Who were these people? What was Mark's true purpose? And why had he kept all of this from me? I was beginning to see that the life I thought I had lived was only a surface, a comfortable lie that had shielded me from a much darker reality. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized, a man with secrets that could change everything. As I closed the diary for the night, a sense of unease settled over me. The house was quiet, but I could feel the weight of the hidden world pressing in, a presence just beyond reach. I knew that to move forward, I would have to confront not only the secrets Mark had left behind but also the shadows that now threatened to consume my own life. The path ahead was uncertain, tangled with betrayal and mystery, but I was determined to follow it wherever it led. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of resolve. This was no longer just Mark's story, it was mine too, and I was ready to uncover the truth, no matter how deep the darkness ran. The knock came without warning, sharp and insistent, echoing through the stillness of the house like a sudden crack in the calm. I had been sitting in the study, the diary open before me, my mind swirling with the tangled threads of Mark's secrets. The sound jolted me upright, heart pounding as I glanced toward the door. For a moment, I hesitated. Who could it be? I wasn't expecting anyone, least of all a visitor. The house felt too quiet, too empty for surprises. But the knocking came again, more urgent this time, and I rose slowly, every nerve alert as I moved toward the door. When I opened it, a man stood there, tall and lean, his dark coat buttoned against the chill in the air. His eyes were sharp, steady, and for a moment I didn't recognize him. Then he spoke, his voice low but firm. "Emma Harper," he said. "I know who you are." I knew Mark. The words hit me like a wave. I stared, searching his face for any hint of deception. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Lucas." He extended a hand, but it wasn't a friendly gesture, it was a warning, a signal that he was here with purpose. I was part of Mark's world, the one he never told you about. The room seemed to shrink around me, the shadows from the study creeping closer as I stepped aside to let him in. Lucas didn't hesitate. He moved with confidence, his eyes scanning the room as if confirming that we were alone. "What do you want?" I asked, clutching the diary to my chest. Lucas's gaze softened just a little. "I'm here because you're digging where you shouldn't. Mark's life was complicated, dangerous even. You need to stop before it's too late." I swallowed hard, anger rising beneath the fear. I have a right to know. He was my husband. I deserve the truth. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging a fact he couldn't argue with. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small USB drive, holding it out to me. "This belonged to Mark. It has files, encrypted, yes, but they contain everything you might need to understand. If you want to know the truth, it's here." I took the USB, feeling its cool weight in my hand. It was more than just a piece of technology, it was a key, a bridge into the hidden world Mark had inhabited. I looked up at Lucas, searching his expression. "Why are you helping me?" He hesitated, then said, "Because Mark trusted you, even if he never told you. And because I don't want you to get hurt." The warning hung in the air, heavy and urgent. I realized then that the danger I'd sensed was real, not just in the pages of a diary or the faded photographs on a corkboard. It was alive, stalking the shadows of Mark's secret life. Lucas stayed for a while, answering my questions cautiously, revealing fragments of the hidden world I had stumbled into. He spoke of alliances and betrayals, of people who operated in the gray spaces between legality and crime. There were names I didn't recognize, places I'd never heard of, and a network that seemed to stretch far beyond the quiet streets of our neighborhood. As he talked, I felt a mixture of fear and determination. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by this stranger with layers of secrets and lies. But now, with Lucas's unexpected arrival and the USB in my hand, I had a chance to uncover the truth, to see the full picture of what Mark's life had really been. Before he left, Lucas gave me one final piece of advice: be careful who you trust. Not everyone wants the truth to come out. The door closed behind him, leaving me alone with the diary, the photographs, and the mysterious USB drive. The quiet of the house had returned, but the air felt charged, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I sat back down at the desk, the weight of the moment settling over me. The secrets were no longer just words on a page, they were real, dangerous, and waiting for me to face them head-on. I plugged the USB into my laptop, the screen flickering to life as files began to load. Encrypted folders stared back at me, a digital maze that promised answers and threats in equal measure. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure, I was no longer just the woman who had lost her husband. I was a woman determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room where I sat, laptop open and the USB drive still plugged in. The encrypted files taunted me with their complexity, but with Lucas's help, I had begun to unlock the layers, revealing fragments of a covert world that Mark had navigated with skill and caution. Yet among the names and transactions, one caught my eye, a name I never expected, Sarah. Sarah was supposed to be my closest friend, the one who had stood by me through years of ups and downs. We had shared laughter, secrets, and countless cups of coffee, but now her name was tangled in Mark's hidden dealings. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach as I stared at the screen, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. I waited until the next day, when the sun was high and the world outside seemed oblivious to the storm churning inside me. I arranged to meet Sarah at a small cafe, the kind of place we used to frequent when life was simpler. My hands trembled slightly as I sipped my coffee, watching her approach with that familiar smile that now felt like a mask. "Sarah," I began carefully, "I found your name in Mark's files. Can you explain what that's about?" Her smile faltered just for a moment before she masked it with a shrug. "Emma, I didn't want you to find out like this. It's complicated." I leaned in, my voice barely above a whisper. "Complicated how? Were you involved? Did you know about his secret life?" Her eyes darted away, and the tension between us thickened. "I helped him, yes. But not in the way you think. I wanted to protect you." "Protect me?" The word sounded hollow. "By keeping secrets? By lying to me?" She looked me in the eye then, her expression raw and vulnerable. "I was scared, Emma. Mark trusted me with things he couldn't share with you. I thought if I could manage it, keep things under control, maybe none of this would hurt you." The confession hit me like a blow. The friend I had confided in, the person I had trusted most, had been part of the web of deception all along. The betrayal stung sharper than I could have imagined. "Why didn't you tell me? Why keep me in the dark while you were part of this?" My voice rose, a mix of anger and disbelief. Sarah's shoulders sagged. "Because I didn't want to lose you. I thought I was protecting you from pain. But now, I see how wrong I was." The cafe around us seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us caught in a fragile, painful moment. The lines between friend and foe blurred, and I realized that this betrayal wasn't black and white, it was tangled with fear, loyalty, and the desperate hope to keep me safe. I struggled to find words, to reconcile the Sarah I knew with the one who had kept such a heavy secret. The trust we had built over years now lay fractured, and I wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. As I left the cafe, the weight of her admission followed me like a shadow. The truth was no longer just about Mark's hidden life, it was about the people I thought I could trust, the alliances that had shifted beneath my feet. The files on the USB drive continued to reveal more layers, maps, bank accounts, lists of names that tied Sarah and others to Mark's covert operations. It was a tangled web, and I was caught in the center, struggling to make sense of the chaos. That night, as I sat alone in the study, the silence was broken only by the faint hum of the laptop. I realized that the betrayal wasn't just a wound to be healed, it was a warning. The deeper I delved, the more dangerous the path became. Yet despite the pain, I knew I couldn't turn back. The truth was out there, tangled with lies and hidden loyalties, and I was determined to uncover it all, even if it meant facing those I once called friends. The days that followed blurred into a relentless pursuit of clarity, a desperate attempt to untangle the web Mark had woven. With Lucas's cautious guidance and Sarah's reluctant confession still echoing in my mind, I plunged deeper into the encrypted files, peeling back layers that revealed a hidden empire of covert business dealings and illicit transactions. The sprawling network was far more complex than I could have imagined, maps pinpointing secret locations, bank accounts scattered across continents, and a list of accomplices whose names sent chills down my spine. I sat in the study late into the night, the glow from my laptop casting pale light on the walls lined with photographs and notes. Each document I decrypted brought new revelations, exposing a shadowed world where Mark had operated with precision and secrecy. The digital records detailed shell companies funneling money through a labyrinth of accounts, transactions too large and too frequent to be innocent. There were references to meetings in exotic cities, off-the-books deals, and whispers of influence that stretched into political circles. One file, in particular, caught my attention, a detailed map marked with locations I recognized as abandoned warehouses and unregistered offices scattered across the city. The notes suggested these places were hubs for operations that blurred the line between legitimate business and organized crime. The realization hit me hard. Mark's secret life was not just about personal betrayal, it was entangled with dangerous, possibly illegal enterprises. The list of accomplices was even more unsettling. Familiar names appeared alongside strangers, business partners, lawyers, and individuals with connections to powerful figures. Some were likely unaware of the full scope, while others seemed deeply embedded in the network. The files hinted at a hierarchy, with Mark positioned near the top, orchestrating moves that balanced risk and reward with chilling calculation. As I pieced together the puzzle, the implications became clear. If this empire collapsed, it could trigger fallout that would reach far beyond my own life. Powerful people were involved, and exposing the truth would not be without consequences. The stakes were higher than I had ever feared. One evening, as I reviewed a batch of encrypted emails, a sudden message popped into my inbox: no subject, no sender, just a line, stop digging or face the consequences. My hands trembled as I read it over and over, the warning unmistakable. I wasn't just uncovering secrets, I was stepping into a battlefield where silence was currency and danger lurked in the shadows. I reached out to Lucas immediately, explaining the message and my growing concerns. He urged caution, reminding me that the people Mark had crossed were not to be underestimated. You have evidence now, he said, voice low and serious. Use it wisely. Find allies who can protect you. The urgency of his words propelled me to seek legal counsel. I found a lawyer recommended by Lucas, a woman named Claire, sharp and discreet, with experience in handling sensitive cases involving corporate crime. Our first meeting was tense but necessary. I laid out the evidence, the files, the threats, and the tangled loyalties that had surfaced. Claire listened carefully, her expression unreadable. We need to secure this evidence, she said firmly. Make copies, encrypt everything, and keep it in multiple locations. Then we prepare for the fallout. People with power don't give up their secrets easily. As we strategized, I felt a strange mix of fear and empowerment. The truth was no longer just a puzzle to solve, it was a weapon to wield. But wielding it meant stepping into the crosshairs of forces I barely understood. Days turned into weeks as I worked with Claire and Lucas, building a case, safeguarding documents, and reaching out to trusted contacts who might help. The pressure mounted, each new revelation tightening the noose of danger around me. I knew the shadows were watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. One night, as I locked up the files and prepared to leave the study, a shadowy figure appeared at the window. Frozen, I watched as they disappeared into the darkness, a silent reminder that my quest for truth was a perilous one. But despite the threats, the betrayals, and the unknown dangers ahead, I was resolved. Mark's secret empire was exposed, and I held the key to unraveling it. The path was fraught with risk, but it was mine to walk. And I would not back down. The weight of the hidden world Mark had left behind pressed heavily on my shoulders as I sat in Claire's office, the soft hum of the air conditioner filling the silence between us. The walls were lined with books and legal binders, but none of that comforted me. What lay before us was a labyrinth of secrets, dangers, and powerful enemies who would not surrender their control lightly. Claire tapped her pen against the desk, eyes sharp and focused. We need to move quickly. The evidence you have is substantial, but it's also a target. If anyone else gets their hands on it first, or worse, if you lose control, you could be in serious danger. I nodded, swallowing the knot of anxiety tightening in my throat. What's the first step? First, we secure everything. Copies of the files, encrypted and stored in multiple locations, physical and digital. We'll use secure cloud services with two-factor authentication and keep physical copies with trusted allies. No one should have access unless absolutely necessary. Claire's meticulous approach made the enormity of the situation feel tangible. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore, it was about survival, strategy, and protection. Next, she continued, we assemble a team. Allies who understand the stakes and can help manage the fallout. That means trusted lawyers, private investigators, and possibly the authorities, if we can find the right contacts not compromised by this network. The idea of involving law enforcement was both reassuring and terrifying. What if the corruption ran deeper than I imagined? Could I trust anyone beyond Claire and Lucas? I'll start reaching out to some contacts, Claire said. But you have to be prepared for pushback. The people involved won't go quietly. They'll try to intimidate you, discredit you, or worse. The warning wrapped around me like a cold cloak. I had already felt the sting of betrayal from those closest to me, and now the threat was more direct, more ominous. Over the next few days, I threw myself into the work, compiling evidence, encrypting files, and meeting with Claire and Lucas to plan the next moves. Every step forward was shadowed by the fear of discovery. I became hyper-aware of every unfamiliar sound, every unexpected knock, every glance from a stranger. One evening, after locking up the study, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street. The windows were tinted, the engine silent. I watched as two figures sat inside, their faces obscured. My heart hammered in my chest. Were they watching me? Waiting for a moment to strike? I called Claire, my voice low and urgent. There's someone outside. I think they're watching the house. Stay inside, she instructed. Don't engage. I'll alert a private security contact. We'll have someone there shortly. The hours that followed were a blur of tension and sleeplessness. A security team arrived, discreet but firm, patrolling the perimeter and reassuring me that I wasn't alone. It was a small comfort in a growing storm. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. I coordinated with Claire to prepare legal documents, compiling everything needed to confront the network and protect what was mine. Lucas continued to provide insight into Mark's secret world, helping me anticipate moves and countermeasures from those who wanted to keep their secrets buried. One afternoon, Claire laid out a strategy for me. We will start by exposing the smaller players first, those who can be convinced to cooperate or fall easily. That will put pressure on the higher-ups and create cracks in their defenses. But every move has to be calculated. One wrong step, and you could lose everything. The reality of the situation settled over me like a heavy fog. I wasn't just fighting for answers anymore, I was fighting for safety, for control, for a future where I could reclaim my life from the shadows that had swallowed it whole. Despite the fear and uncertainty, a fierce determination burned within me. The truth was out there, tangled in lies and danger, but I held the pieces. With Claire's guidance and Lucas's knowledge, I would stand my ground. I would take control of the hidden empire Mark left behind, no matter the cost. That night, as I locked the door behind me and glanced once more at the quiet street outside, I realized this was no longer just about Mark's secrets. It was about reclaiming my life, and I was ready to fight for it. The video file appeared without warning, buried deep within the encrypted folders on the USB drive, a file I had overlooked in the maze of documents and coded messages. Its title was simple, For Emma. My hands trembled as I clicked play, the screen flickering to life and revealing Mark's familiar face, older and wearier than I remembered, his eyes searching mine through the lens as if trying to reach across the void between us. He began to speak in a low, measured tone, his voice carrying the weight of secrets too heavy to bear alone. Emma, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and the truth is coming out. I didn't want you to find yourself in danger, but I also couldn't keep hiding from you. There's so much you don't know, about me, about the people I was involved with, and about what I hoped to protect. His eyes flickered with regret as he continued. I trusted you with my heart, but not with my other life. It was dangerous, and I thought I could keep it separate. But the lines blurred, and I feared the consequences for everyone I cared about. Mark's confession was raw and unfiltered, a glimpse into the man behind the facade. He spoke of the covert business empire he had built, the alliances forged in shadows, and the threats that had forced him to live a double life. He warned of powerful figures who would stop at nothing to maintain their secrets, and he urged me to be cautious, to trust no one completely. Then, his tone shifted, a flicker of hope breaking through the darkness. There is a safe place, a sanctuary, where you can go if things become too dangerous. I've arranged for it, and the key is in a secure location you'll find in the files. It's not just a refuge, it's a chance to start over, to rebuild. As the video ended, silence filled the room, heavy and profound. Mark's words echoed in my mind, a mixture of warning and hope that left me both shaken and strangely reassured. The existence of the safe place changed everything. It was a lifeline, a plan made in the shadows for a future I hadn't dared to imagine. But it also raised questions. Who else knew about it? Could I trust the people Mark had involved? And was I prepared to leave everything behind if necessary? I reached out to Claire and Lucas immediately, sharing the video and discussing the implications. Claire stressed the importance of locating the key Mark mentioned and securing the safe haven before any threats escalated. Lucas, drawing on his knowledge of Mark's world, offered to help track down the location discreetly. The days that followed were a whirlwind of cautious investigation and careful planning. Every step brought new challenges and revelations, but the promise of the safe place gave me a sense of direction amid the chaos. One afternoon, as I sifted through a series of encrypted files, I found a coded message that hinted at the location of the key, a safety deposit box in a bank miles away, registered under a pseudonym Mark had used. The discovery felt like a turning point, a tangible piece of a puzzle that had long seemed impossible to solve. With Claire's help, I arranged to access the box, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. Inside, I found a small envelope containing a key and a note from Mark, urging me to use it wisely and reminding me that the sanctuary was more than just a place, it was a new beginning. That evening, I sat alone in the study, the key heavy in my hand, the weight of Mark's final message pressing down on me. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger, but for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of control. Mark's video had not only revealed the truth but had also handed me the means to protect myself and perhaps find peace. The safe place was waiting, a refuge from the shadows and a beacon for a future I had yet to embrace. As the night deepened, I made a silent vow to follow his plan, to face whatever came next with courage and resolve. The journey was far from over, but with the truth exposed and the sanctuary within reach, I was ready to step into the unknown. The moment I closed the door to the hidden room behind me, a quiet finality settled over the house. The familiar walls, once a sanctuary of shared memories, now felt like the stage of a life that had slipped irretrievably through my fingers. I packed a small suitcase with the essentials, the diary, the photographs, the key Mark had left me, and set the rest aside, knowing that the life I was leaving behind could no longer hold me. The house was silent, save for the faint creak of the floorboards beneath my feet and the soft whisper of the wind against the windows. I paused in the hallway, taking one last look around the rooms that had witnessed so much, laughter, arguments, secrets, and now, revelations that had shattered the foundation of everything I thought I knew. I locked the garage door behind me, the sound echoing through the empty space like a final goodbye. The key pressed cold on my hand, a symbol of both closure and new beginnings. Outside, the night air was crisp and clear, carrying with it the promise of change. A week later, I found myself at the airport, the hum of travelers and distant announcements a stark contrast to the quiet stillness I had left behind. The weight of the past clung to me, but beneath it was a flicker of hope, a fragile, persistent light that urged me forward. As the plane took off, ascending into the clouds, I gazed out the window at the shrinking world below. The city, the secrets, the betrayals, all of it became a distant memory, a chapter closed but not forgotten. I was heading to Colorado, a place Mark had chosen for the sanctuary he had spoken of, a refuge where I could heal, rebuild, and reclaim the parts of myself that had been lost. The future was uncertain, the path uncharted, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a quiet strength growing within me. I was Emma Harper, widow, survivor, and now, a woman determined to forge a new life beyond the shadows of the past. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it was mine to take, step by step, into the unknown. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.